And we are eventually live. The other guy left, that strange guy. Who is that guy that was there earlier?
That's my husband, Steve.
Right, okay. Well, luckily he didn't get crash. Episode 5 of Start, Scale, Grow, the podcast about recruiting in the technology space. There's plenty of podcasts out there for startups to talk about how to raise capital. There's plenty of podcasts out there that talk about the inspiration of running your own business, but there's very few that talk about the recruitment side of it. One of the things that's been more apparent, I think, over the last few months is how recruitment and marketing are so deeply intertwined. And I thought it would be a good idea to have someone who's got a recruitment background and now a marketing business to come and talk to us about this and maybe give us some inspo. And Catherine Toms, lovely to have you here. One half of the Toms, the other half has gone. Did you want to take a quick minute or so to give us a bit of a bio, a bit of an overview?
Fabulous. Thank you, Simon. Thank you for having me. And yes, you really have hit my favourite topic because where two worlds collide. My background was in recruitment for the first sort of decade of my career. And then I moved over into marketing. And the similarities between the two industries are same skills, same mindset, same things that we're thinking about. So delighted to share some ideas with you today about how we can make the most of them.
Nice. And so your business now is the Toms, and it's you and your husband that we talked about earlier. What sort of clients do you normally work with? What sort of work do you normally do at the moment?
Absolutely. So now we do training and upskilling and consultancy in broader marketing. So we do still play with a lot of recruitment consultants and quite heavily in the recruitment space, but broader advising recruitment, all sorts of industries, how they upskill their marketing teams to get better profile out there, get more efficiencies and effectiveness from their marketing efforts. We all know it's got busy, it's got noisy, it's got hard to get attention. So working with marketing teams to really upskill them. And it's a tough world. We just get used to search and social and TikTok and Reels, and then ChatGPT swoops in. So there's a whole new world of things to think about. So it's always changing and always evolving. And we work with businesses on, well, how do you navigate all that change and how do you stay ahead and how do you make sure that whatever you're doing is working as best it can for you, particularly in today's world where there's scrutiny on the budgets and everybody's being a bit squeezed as well.
Yeah, lovely. So let's jump into it then. So we were talking off air earlier about sort of the synergy between recruitment and marketing and how basically it's kind of a war for attention. Did you want to just share some thoughts on that? Because I know that's something that you're particularly keen to talk about.
Yeah, 100%. So essentially, I guess when you think about it, recruitment is marketing. So when we think about marketing in the classic sense of the word, we're thinking about how does a business take a product and service to a target market and convince that target market that they are the best choice for that product and service. So you've got to understand, well, who is that target audience in the first place? You've got to understand your positioning and you've got to understand what that person's sort of motivation to buy is or what those triggers are that's going to get them to buy your thing or do your thing.
Yeah.
And if we reflect back, recruitment is exactly the same thing. So instead of a customer, you are thinking about your customer is a job seeker and you are trying to put yourself out there in a way that somebody is going to be tempted to jump from wherever they are at the moment and see their next career move and their next career opportunity is with you. So you need to understand, well, who's that target audience? What kind of people are we trying to hire for? What kind of talent? What kind of personalities and culture fit in our organization? And then how are we going to get ourselves out there and put ourselves in front of those people so that when we have an opportunity, we are an appealing place to go and people want to apply for the roles that we have. So essentially, huge synergies. We're just talking about instead of a customer, we've got a candidate, and instead of a product or service, we have career opportunities and career paths.
Yeah. And I'm guessing then that there's this real synergy between consumer brand and employer brand. So we look at businesses that are very visible as consumer businesses, so Apple and TikTok and some of the social media businesses, for example. They then also, I suppose, have an employer brand that sort of sits alongside that. How important is it to have a strong consumer brand to inform your employer brand, do you think?
It's a really interesting question, and I think that there's a couple of different things to unpack there.
Right.
Number one, it can actually almost be a bit of a curse if you have a really strong consumer brand. Often people then think that the culture in the company and the employee team that sit behind it, right, they've got it nailed. It's going to be really glamorous. It's going to be this amazing place to work. And then you go behind the scenes and you pull the curtain back and it's all quite simple or sometimes quite messy. So absolutely. The advantage of being a strong consumer brand is you've got recognition in the market, people know you, but they will have a certain perception attached to that brand, which can work in your favor or not.
Yeah.
Certainly, brands that are less well known have to work harder to get themselves out there. But then in that way, I guess you're almost saying you've got that blank sheet of paper. So you can create in people's mind what it's like to work in that organization. So consumer brands are that outward facing, what are we offering the customer? Your employer brand is more what it's like once you walk through those doors, once you get behind the scenes, and what people are looking for in an organization to work for is often different to what they're looking for that, outward facing consumer brand. So as an employer brand, always like to think about it a little bit like what the qualities or characteristics you'd look for in a really good friend. You've got to be consistent, you've got to be trustworthy, you've got to offer opportunities, you've got to offer support, you've got to offer growth. That can be quite different to a consumer brand facing into the market. Yeah. So it's pros and cons.
Yeah. So having a consumer brand on one side can be a real benefit, but present some challenges as well. And then if you don't have a consumer brand, then some challenges there because you're not getting people attracted to you virally through your consumer brand. But then you probably need to focus on that employer brand a bit harder. But then you make that, I guess, whatever you want it to be, because it's not informed by people's perceptions of you as a consumer. Gotcha.
Yeah, cool. 100%.
So we're in a world at the moment where, obviously, in the tech space, there's been a whole bunch of layoffs, and it's economically a bit of a funny old time. I was going to say fuzzy old time. I guess it's fuzzy as well. How do businesses then who have been through layoffs, and Meta being a really good example, those businesses that have been through highly publicized layoffs, where potentially still posting record profits but letting people go, and these things never sit well with the general public. How do you position yourself, or what can you do to rescue your brand if it needs rescuing from a marketing perspective there?
So I think that across all industries and all sectors, there's a certain degree of uncertainty at the moment, isn't there? We're all getting hit with inflation. We're all reading the news headlines, and we're all seeing these layoffs happening in big swathes, predominantly, as you said, within the tech industry space at the moment. But people get a general sense of sort of nervousness and uncertainty. So what we find, though, is the opportunity is that then people that are looking to move for a genuine career, career growth or career, the next career step. So I think you can't ignore it. I think this is where it comes into getting inside your target audiences, so the job seeker's head and the job seeker's mind, and thinking about, well, what are those questions that they would be asking at the moment before they make any career move? And it would be around, well, is this going to affect my long-term career prospects? If I'm the last person in, does that therefore mean I'm the first person out the door? What can you tell me about security in the industry? What's happening? What's the new structure look like? Why have you made those layoffs? Because some organizations, there's very legitimate reasons why they have restructured. They've changed technology, they've changed structure, they've changed what they do in-house versus what they outsource. But you've got to be able to alleviate the fears of someone in the marketplace in a genuine, trustworthy way, that then they're still going to feel confident to apply to you, and confident that that's a good career move. Because at the end of the day, our jobs are such an inherent part of us, not only for our own value and purpose and what we do each day, but often our income might affect our family. It might affect, our ability to pay our mortgage and our school fees. So you've got all of these layers of things that are happening inside somebody's head when they decide to make a career decision. So you've got to just be able to be out there and be on the front foot. I think if you try and polish over it and don't talk about it, it becomes like the elephant in the room, and people are going to have those questions anyway. So you've got to get on the front foot with the way that you're communicating. If you're hiring into somewhere that had layoffs or restructures or redundancies, you've got to talk about, right, we've now completed this process and this is what we've been looking to achieve and these are our goals. And, I think Mark Zuckerberg, if you're going to, polish a situation, he spoke all about the fact that now they'd removed these layers. You're cutting out hierarchy, you're cutting out process, you're giving people more variety and more autonomy and more creativity in their role. So you've got to have your messaging clear, and you cannot ignore what's going on. But I think that is the case for all organisations at the moment. Is there's a certain degree of nervousness about making a move in the market at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things there. I mean, the situation we're in at the moment, the market we're in, I think it's been sort of brewing for what, best part of 6 months now. So I think everyone's kind of used to this, and anyone who's in the working world, particularly in the tech space at the moment, will be aware of it. And I think people just recognise it for what it is. So I agree. I think, touching on one of your comments there, but about being genuine, I think there's a difference between having to downsize for whatever reasons and battling through it. There's a difference between that and we still made X billion dollars of the profit, but we've let a whole bunch of people go. So I think, to your point, being genuine about it. How do you do that then? I mean, do you do something as simple as some social media posts about it? Is that one way of doing it? Do you put FAQs on your careers page? Like, do you make this stuff publicly facing? Yeah. What would you be thinking?
Yeah, I'd definitely go with FAQs on the careers page. I mean, it depends how much publicly you're sharing in the news about. So depending, obviously if you're a big Meta, the second you breathe or change direction or do anything, the whole world is reporting on it. If you're a smaller organization, you might not have that level of scrutiny going on about what you're doing, but still people will have spoken, and people in industries and circles will know reputations around certain industries or certain companies. So definitely, yes, be prepared to have very clear FAQs on an employment section of your website. It's certainly something that you might share on your LinkedIn company page about why you're doing certain things, having somebody like the CEO or the CTO or the MD or whoever talking about, right, well, this is the direction that we're going in and this is why we're confident it's going to give growth. Yeah, you've got to be, whatever you're comfortable sharing publicly, I think is advantageous about it. And also, people are increasingly kind of ethical about where they want to work, and knowing that a company shares their values and shares their sense of purpose. There was a report last year from LinkedIn that said something like 70% of Gen Zs wouldn't apply for a role if they didn't feel that company, was aligned with their own personal values. So you're right, it's going to strike out a certain number of people that are maybe like, oh, hang on, you've made redundancies, but you're making profits. But for other people, they may see that as an opportunity. So, but yes, being public and aware of what people are thinking, and also having your hiring managers very, very confident and capable to answer these kind of questions in an interview situation is really important. They might need a little bit more training before they go into interview as to how to answer some of these things, so that they're not promising the earth and then somebody joins and that's not reality, but that they can smooth and alleviate people's fears as well.
Yeah. We've actually done some sessions like that recently with some businesses that are sort of, I think, teetering on the brink of having to make changes, and some of the discussions we have there are, once the decision's been made, anyone who's then going to be outwardly facing to the market, whether it's a founder or recruiting teams in the future, you need to be aligned in how you communicate these things. Sometimes there's sensitivity around all that sort of stuff, and sometimes a slight change of phrase between one person and another in a business can raise eyebrows or make it look externally as if you guys are just making this up as you go along. You don't know what you're doing, which is never a good look for if you're trying to be considered as a good employer.
I'd love to pick up on that point, because I think alignment is a huge word here, and I think alignment, we've touched on it a couple of times, because sometimes there's a misalignment between somebody's expectation of a consumer brand and then the reality of when they get behind the scenes and what it's like to actually work at some of these companies. They're highly polished on the outside, but you get through the door and it's not quite what you maybe imagined as a consumer. But that alignment as well between employer brand or employer value proposition and then the reality of working somewhere. This is not about having a shiny, polished story that we sell externally. And then as soon as somebody actually applies for a role, their application process doesn't look and feel like that. Or once they join, the onboarding doesn't feel like that. This is about consistency and alignment all the way through. So whatever you say on the outside should be how it feels all the way through somebody applying for a role, accepting a role, starting a role, and then having a career with you. So there's no point, exactly trying to say things that aren't true. And particularly if it's sensitive or a little bit of a uncertain time, having that communication alignment between whoever is, maybe the talent acquisition, facing the jobs out into the market, then the hiring manager, then HR, then founders. Everybody's got to be on the same page with the realities of what that means and what that looks like.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a sausage and sizzle analogy in there somewhere, but I can't come to it.
I knew you'd get the sausage and the sizzle somewhere. 100% though, 100%. If it's all sizzle and then you get through the door and it's not, that's the worst. Because then you lose trust, don't you? You lose trust and you lose credibility. So it's much better that people go into any situation knowing the realities of what it's like and being, that's where we get a good match, isn't it? If right from the second I see a role and I read about a culture and I'm like, yep, that sounds like me. And then it looks and feels like that when I show up for the interview. It looks and feels like that when I show up on day one and through my career. And as I'm supported, that's the winning formula, isn't it?
I've been fortunate enough in the past to work with some clients who are really open to being very genuine and having real language around things like job ads. So, a lot of job ads, I don't know why, but they're written in a way that makes it sound like from Victorian era England. Due to exponential growth of our like people just don't talk like that. But I've been fortunate to have clients in the past who've been really comfortable with me saying things like, this year we really want this role to help focus on building these things. We've been doing this. This needs to get better. Like, we want you in this role to help us with that. And people go, oh my God, that's what I want.
Real. Well, and that's another point where recruitment probably needs to become more like marketing. Marketing has become very conversational, hasn't it? Everything you read, you talk about a brand feeling human, feeling connected with the brand, getting a sense of who this brand is. And you're right, job adverts are kind of on the opposite end of the extreme sometimes. They're either horrifically boring or they're just bullet point, and they're all, this is what we expect from you. You will be doing this. And there's no like, what's in it for me? It's no like, right, join this amazing team, be part of our future growth, work with these amazing humans, grow your career in this way. We've got to get out of that mindset of like, right, this is a list of criteria and things you need to have, and be much more, this is the opportunity, and bring that more conversational, warm language to it is way more appealing.
There's a very simple test you can do to understand if recruitment ads are talking to the right person. You can do a word count on how many times they say we, because often businesses like to talk about, we do this and we sell widgets and we think we're awesome. So word count on how many times they say we, and then word count on how many times they say you. Most job ads, most being broad brush statement, are really heavily weighted in, we talk about us. You can even do things like do a total word count for the job ad, and then highlight and word count the part that talks about the benefits for the employee or for the new person, and it's usually like a fifth of the job ad. So you want someone to join you, and you spend only a fifth of the time telling them why they should and what's in it for them.
100%. And I think we've seen a big shift in broader marketing world where recruitment would do really well to follow suite. And that's absolutely it. It's not about us. It's about them. It's about a good product marketing, good service marketing doesn't focus on what the product or the service is. It focuses on the benefit to you and how your life's going to be better, easier, different if you buy this thing or do this thing. And that's exactly the same as, marketing a career choice with somebody or marketing a job opportunity with somebody. We've got to remember that as individuals, we're all incredibly egocentric and we want to know, well, what am I going to get out of it? And the more we can switch that language around and show somebody, and this comes back to that, exciting consumer brand versus boring, B2B brand. Actually, what the person cares about is, am I going to work with really good people? Am I going to have great growth opportunities? Is it a cracking culture? I'm going to be exposed to new things and I'm going to have a safe career and be well paid for it. At the end of the day, that's the crux of what people want in a job ad. They don't care if you've been printing and manufacturing for 25 years, or you've got 27 offices around Australia, or your founder was 120 years ago and it's a family business. They don't care about any of that stuff. They care what's in it for me and what am I going to get from applying for this role and joining this organization.
Yeah, and I think along the journey, people might start caring about that stuff, but right at the beginning, like it's about them. So there's a couple of things there, and I'll jump onto one quickly. You and I were on email yesterday, and you asked me a question, and I completely I didn't know what you're talking about, but now I do. So we're talking about, so you've got a big consumer brand, you do something sexy, like that attracts people. What if you don't? So a client of ours, Paper Cut Software, they make an absolute point of saying that they work in the least sexy part of technology, but they're the best at it. So even if you don't do something that's considered particularly sexy, like printing software might not sound particularly exciting, but the way that the guys at Papercut talk about it, the way they talk about the impact of what they do and how that impacts and affects customers is awesome. And it's a really good example of a business really thinking deeply and being very human about what it is they do, and then how that impacts potential employees who are going to join them. And you're right. Most people just want to work with good people in a nice environment, feel respected, be compensated fairly for what they do. I don't think people expect to be paid huge amounts of money. They're compensated fairly for the work they do and feel secure and stable and valued.
And that's it. And when you talk about, boring businesses, we've got our SAPs and our Oracles and our market, a lot of them could be perceived as being actually quite boring businesses. And the other example that you and I were chatting about as well that I really liked was the Moo cards. So Moo started out in the business card space and have now gone into, kind of all sorts of corporate merchandising. But what I loved about their differentiator was for them, it's all about quality. They were saying that, most corporate merchandising, yourself, you walk around a conference or a careers event and you basically get thrown with loads of tat that then probably doesn't last the distance, gets put in the bin. And they pride themselves on providing really good, well-designed quality, often from recyclable materials. So they're out to disrupt the industry. But actually, it started with printing business cards. From an employer brand, their tone of voice is beautiful, their design is beautiful. They talk about, I'm just going to cheat a second and have a quick look at my notes because they were awesome. And they talked about having these amazing humans that work for their organization and are the kind of future of growth. And they're definitely worth a look in terms of Moo. So they say, they things like 15 years of mooing it instead of doing it. And then when you go onto their website, a couple of things that really stood out for me on the Who We Are section, they call it the nice people shaping the future of Moo. Yeah. So that's one sentence, the nice people shaping the future of Moo. One sentence tells me you're going to work with good people, but also shaping the future. You're looking at growth, you're looking at innovation, you're being creative. So much in one sentence. And then my final favorite one was, we're always looking for bright minds and bushy attitudes. So it's just, such great language, but actually what, would not perceive as being a sexy brand. It's B2B business cards and merchandising.
Yeah. And I think I did a post a little while ago on LinkedIn saying that, not many recruiters are copywriters, not many copywriters are recruiters. And I think copywriting and being able to write well is a skill that think every talent team, every people team should invest time if they can. The other thing that I wanted,
And on that, can I add one tiny note to
yes,
that? Read a job advert out loud. If it sounds boring, it probably
yeah,
is. If you're stumbling over the words and it sounds like it's stuff full of jargon, it probably
yeah,
is. If you can read it out loud the way you'd explain that job to a candidate if you were sitting in a room with
yeah,
them, be human,
mm,
write like you talk,
yeah,
whatever you do, write like you
mm,
talk. It
mm,
just is so much more easy to read and
yeah.
engaging.
And expanding on that, I don't know if you know a guy called Dave Trott. If you don't, you should have a look at Dave Trott. In one of his books, he makes the comment. Dave Trott's a marketing guru guy. One of the comments he makes is, you're only ever talking to one person when you write copy. Like, you think, I've got this job ad that's going out there to the world, but you're only ever talking to the one person who's reading it. So be as human as
Yeah,
possible.
100%.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, just thinking about from a marketing perspective, if you're on any social media at the moment, you've probably seen a certain marketing agency where they talk about they got a book that they give away, and all you need to do is pay for postage and packaging. It's the ultimate sales methodology. But they talk about 3% of any market is actively buying at the moment. Something like 20% are considering, and the rest are not in buying mode. And most most businesses only ever talk to the 3%, but they want you to talk to everyone. Is there something in that recruiting or recruiting marketing could learn?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, thank you for bringing it up. One of my favorite statistics comes from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful, but the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, they're based here in Melbourne, actually, and they do an awful lot of scientific research and data-driven research on B2B marketing. And you're absolutely right. If you think about B2B customers, yes, they might only ever update their payroll system or their tech stack every 3, 4, 5 years. Job seekers are the same, aren't they? We don't, unless we're freelancing in the market at the moment, we're not actively looking for jobs all the time, but we do have half an eye on the job market regardless, just
Yeah.
because we like to see what's going on out there. So as recruiters or talent acquisition teams, an awful lot of people are not actively looking for work at the moment. So if all we ever do is hit them with a job ad, it's a very transactional relationship where we only pop up when they are actively looking for work or actively looking for an opportunity. And the rest of the time, they've got no interaction or relationship with us. So if you think about it in the way that Ehrenberg Bass talk about it in this 95-5, it's all about talking to people that are out of market and staying top of mind and having a brand awareness. So when we buy products or services, or when we apply for a job with an organization, familiarity comes a lot into it. It's a human psychology that we are more biased to work with people or apply for roles where there's that level of familiarity, which that then plays to what you were talking about before, why people maybe feel more confident applying to a company where they know the consumer brand because they've got that level of familiarity or knowledge already. So what we're trying to create is familiarity in people's mind. So even though they're not looking for a job, they do know us. They know what we do. They have a sense about the organization, what the culture might be like, the kind of projects you work on, the kind of people that work there. So it's not actively just showing up when there's a job opportunity. It's having that ongoing conversation. But yes, that is absolutely a crucial part of it.
And I'm guessing from get into like marketing funnel perspective, and you relate that to recruiting, having that familiarity. So via content, long form, short form content that's out there. When a recruiter picks up the phone and calls Catherine out of the blue and says, "Hey, I found your profile, I've got a role," and they say, "I'm calling from XYZ company," and you say something like, "Oh yeah, I've seen a lot of their stuff online. Yeah, okay, yeah, I'll have a conversation." The
Yeah,
conversion to get cold prospect into a warm conversation increases if there's familiarity, as
yeah,
opposed to, "Yeah, never heard of you, not really interested. Like,
yeah.
yeah, send me a bid if
Much
you want, but I'm not really that bothered."
Yeah, much harder, much harder. And we know it. You see it every day, don't you? When you go to upgrade your phone, get a new laptop, buy a new car, you've already got the brands in your brain that you think about and you know about. And it's much harder for a player that's never been on your radar. So we talk about it as the know, like, trust factor. So the more people know about you, that's about just being visible. And even as a small business or a small recruitment team, the great thing these days is there's so many platforms that you can create profiles on and you can create conversation on for free. You don't have to have big mega budgets. It's not about sticking ads in the paper anymore. There's a lot of opportunities to show up and be creating conversation. So that gets you known that your market is out there. People then like you if you show personality and you're human and you connect and you show, people want to engage. They don't, as I said, there's no such thing as a boring business, but there's certainly boring content. Don't put boring content out there. Put stuff that's valuable or interesting or going to educate people. Because ultimately, if they then feel like they trust you, when job opportunities roll around, you've got a way easier path to create conversation and connection than if you're just going from that cold point that you've been invisible under a rock for a while and then now you're trying to pop up and attract people to you.
Yeah. And so I guess that's a really good takeaway then for businesses that are either, don't have a big TA team that are able to do this, or they don't have a particularly big budget. You can sit and think through the coming year. We want to be known to our target audience, which, software engineers, whatever it is. How do we do that? And then how do we get consistent? I guess consistency around content is part of the thing, by consistently having content across the platforms where your target audience is hanging out. Probably LinkedIn is going to be one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, quality over quantity.
Yep.
Don't put yourself under pressure and feel like you've suddenly got to start posting on LinkedIn 3 to 5 times a week.
Yep.
Way better that you show up once a fortnight or once a week with something interesting. And again, it's not about you. It's about the target audience that you're trying to attract. So you get inside their head and go, well, what would they be interested in? What would they find interesting? Maybe you've brought in a new technology stack. Maybe you've changed your ways of working. Maybe you're a massive advocate for hybrid working. Maybe you've won an award. Maybe you're focusing in on, gender equality or something around a diversity point. There's a whole bunch of stuff you could be sharing that would be of interest, but we're trying to kind of entertain and educate people. So in terms of how frequently you can do that and how often and what you show up with, it's just trying to have a bit of an idea in your head around. And you can, if you don't know, ask people. So when you're interviewing people or when they're joining the organization, what was it that appealed? What was it that you liked? And stories, employee advocacy is massive. So having stories of people that have joined the organization, their experiences, what they're finding about working there, celebrating promotions, celebrating milestones. There's lots of different things you can talk about that actually will start to influence somebody's external perspective of what it's like to work with you, but can be quite quick and easy to create. Because if you don't have a big marketing team and a big marketing budget, you've got to be smart. It's got to be better that you're consistent than you just show up and go on this massive drive and when you're recruiting and then you disappear again. It's trying to kind of maintain it. A bit like going to the gym.
Yes. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because COVID sort of made us all really comfortable with lo-fi content all of a sudden, didn't it? We didn't have the ability to go out and film, like videos. So like people making content like this at home and just sharing it, suddenly it became really easy. Cutting content on your phone suddenly became super simple. So the ability to be able to rapidly create content, get it out there, get it distributed, is there for everyone, regardless of your budget. Tell me though, one thing I'm interested in is we see a bit of stuff happening around social issues, and then sometimes some backlash on that as well. So the whole BLM movement, businesses suddenly having a BLM banner, or I stand behind the International Women's Day, which should absolutely be celebrated, but businesses then coming out in support of International Women's Day when they have no women on the board or no women in C-suite, all that sort of stuff. Is there a risk in that sort of stuff, or should you just get behind what you get behind? And
no, No, absolutely not. It's got to be like a stick of rock. It's got to run through the organization. If you are just the shiny exterior, and certainly I know there was a big backlash a couple of years ago from International Women's Day, where all these businesses, exactly that, they came out and they did these big shiny posts, and they did a lovely story about some woman that had achieved X in her career. And then somebody actually created it was an entire Google slide that then I think turned into like 100-page PDF, calling every single one of these brands out for how many, non-white males were actually sitting on their board at the moment. So no. I mean, obviously, and I think with things like International Women's Day, it's not about turning up with cupcakes on a day and celebrating the females in your organization. It's more important to talk about what you're doing to address gender equality and hiring and pay parity and having those kind of messages, but never do anything that's only skin deep, because that comes back to the sausage and the sizzle. And then as soon as somebody digs below the surface, again, you lose trust, you lose credibility, because it's not the reality. So I guess everything's got to be, as we said, say what you are, be true to what you are. Don't show up and advocate for these things if you're not living and breathing it behind the scenes. We've seen a lot of that with sustainability as well, and the whole green efforts and businesses coming out and being all shiny on the surface, but you dig into processes and systems and it's a long way off.
I feel like we could talk about this all day, and if we wanted to, we probably could.
I might just have to get another cup of tea.
But I am mindful of time, so I think this has been a brilliant chat. But I think sort of big ticket items are: be genuine, use language that's human. Remember, know, like, trust. So look at your brand and maybe who you compete against for talent. Are you known? Will people like you? Will they trust you? And if you're going to promote any sort of social issues, like, they've got to be who you are, not just, as you said, skin deep.
Yeah, because people will go and check you out in a heartbeat on social and websites and whatnot. The only other one I would add to that list is it's not about you. So every time you publish anything, hit post, send a job ad, get out of your shoes and get out of your head. And as you said, remember, there's a human being on the end of it that's reading it. The closer you can get into their head and understand, well, what are they thinking about? What questions would they have about joining this organization? What questions would they have about joining this role? What might keep them up the night before the interview? What might they wonder about if we were going to make them an offer? And think about those things and bring those to the forefront, and don't make it about you, make it about them. Would be, a game changer for anyone out there trying to look and attract talent in today's market.
Amazing. Thank you for this. This has been awesome. Like I said, could talk about it all day. We'll put a link when we post this, we'll put a link to your business. We'll put your LinkedIn profile in there. We'll put a link to the institute that I can't remember that you mentioned as well. That you can put
Ehrenberg Bass. I'll send it to you. Some really good stuff. And there's some stuff on LinkedIn as well that's handy. So I'll send you a couple of resource links that would be useful.
Perfect. And if people want to talk to you and get in touch and pick your brains a bit further, I'm sure you'd be more than happy for them to do that.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for having me. That's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, my friend. Lovely to see you again.
Bye.
Cheers.